Welcome, this is Eco 3104 group assignment video presentation that you'll be watching. Our group has chosen GDP, central banks, inflation, recession, unemployment, and interest rate as our main topic to be discussed today. Macroeconomy in Malaysia. Global data forecasts the real GDP to grow by 6.5% and consumptions by 6.8% in 2022. Malaysia ranked 12 out of 190 countries in the World Bank's Doing Business ranking in 2020. According to global data, the manufacturing sector is expected to witness 5.2% growth in 2022. The gross domestic product (GDP) is the amount of goods and services produced in a year in a country. It is the market value of all finite goods and services made within the borders of a country in a year. It is often positively correlated with the standards of living, alternative measures to GDP for that purpose. Why is GDP implemented? GDP is implemented as it is one of measure of the size of the economy. It is also as the indicator of economic health of any country. GDP also can measure spending on all goods and services, or it can be also measure all income earned. Who do the GDP measurement? GDP is measured by National Statistical Agency of the country such as in United States, Bureau of Economic Analysis, and in Malaysia we have the Department of Statistics Malaysia, DOSM, publish the GDP data for quarterly and annual basis by productions and expenditure approaches at current and constant prices. How is GDP determined? There are three ways of determining GDP: product or output approach, income approach, and expenditure approach. I will choose to elaborate more about the expenditure approach. The expenditure approach works on the principle that all of the products must be bought by somebody, therefore the value of the total products must be equal to people's total expenditure in buying things. The significant methods of calculating the expenditure approach is GDP equal to C, private consumption, plus investment, gross investment, plus G, gross spending, plus EX minus I, where the exports minus the imports. Based on Prime Minister Departments of Statistics Malaysia, Malaysia's GDP expanded 5.0%, underpinned by stronger domestic demand in the first quarter of 2022. GDP comparisons with selected Asian countries shows that Malaysia's GDP in 2020 had declined until negative 5.5% and fluctuate until it rise again until 5.0% in first quarter of 2022.
What is unemployment? Unemployment is the condition of one who is capable of working, actively seeking work, but unable to find any work. It is important to note that to be considered unemployed person must be an active member of the labor force and in search of remunerative work. What is rate of unemployment? Rate of unemployment is the ratio of the number of people unemployed to the total number of people in the labor force. Rate of unemployment in Malaysia. Malaysia's unemployment rate of 3.9% in April 2022 is derived from dividing the number of unemployed individuals at 649,300 by the country's 16.5 million people labor force, according to the DOSM's statement. At 3.9%, Malaysia's April 2022 unemployment rate dipped below 4% for the first time since the COVID-19 outbreak, which began in early 2020. Then, what is the unemployment situation in Malaysia? A significant year-on-year decrease was due to the implementation of the MCO in Peninsular Malaysia during January last year. The graph shows the number of unemployed persons declined further in January 2022 to record 680.4 thousand persons, lowered by 1.1%, which is negative 7.3 thousand persons, as against December 2021, which is 687.6 thousand persons. What causes of unemployment in Malaysia? According to the Ministry of Finance, in 2019, unemployment among youth is due to lack of work experience, lack of skills, insufficient education levels, and skills incompatibility to compete in the labour market. What is effect of unemployment in Malaysia? Unemployment causes an rise in criminal activities and may affect mental health indirectly. What are 4 types of unemployment? First, frictional unemployment. Second, structural unemployment. Third, natural rate of unemployment. And fourth, cyclical unemployment. What is recession? Recession is a period during which aggregate output declines. A recession is a significant decline in economic activity spread across the economy, lasting more than a few months, normally visible in real GDP, real income, employment, industrial production, and wholesale retail sales. When was recession happen? Malaysia fell into a recession in 1985 with a gross domestic product GDP contracting 1% that year. The unemployment rate rose to 5.6% in 1985 and 7.4% in 1986. The non-performing loan (NPL) ratios of commercial banks hit a height of 30% in 1987 and 1988. How was recession happen? Dr. Mahathir Mohamad was appointed Minister of Trade and Industry in November 1980. A year later, the Prime Minister announced a state-sponsored heavy industry project with the declared goal of strengthening the manufacturing sector's base. In the month of November, the Heavy Industry Corporation of Malaysia, HICOM, a public sector holding company, was founded in 1980. The company was formed to serve as the apex government organisation in charge of putting the law into effect, branded New Policy. Why was recession happen? Recession happened because of commodities shock in 1985 or 1986. The major issues during the 1980s was the heavy industry program that the nation had embarked on. Heavy Industries Corporation of Malaysia Berhad was a public sector entity that was established to carry out a heavy industry project. The programs that involved massive government expenditure, which was partly paid with petroleum revenue, but it was insufficient, and the government began borrowing against future oil revenues. Unfortunately, commodity prices along with crude oil prices crashed from 1985 through to 1986. The government had to embark on an austerity drive as a result of the ballooning debt from the heavy industry program. Who is affected with recessions? The first one is firms. In a downturn, businesses will aim to save expenses by keeping wage low. Some workers, particularly contracted workers, may face wage decreases.
What is inflation? Inflation is a situation of rising prices in the economy. A more exact definition of inflation is a sustained increase in the general price level in an economy. When is the inflation in Malaysia? inflation rate in Malaysia from 1987 to 2027. What affect inflation in Malaysia? The first is labor shortages due to restriction on foreign workers. Second, the impact of devastating flood in part of the country which also hit production and transportation very severely. What are three main factors that will keep inflation relatively low? The first is the cap on petrol prices, especially around 95, will help control any further oil price effect. The second is wages and salaries are still low and stagnant and have yet to see any real recovery, so wage push inflation will not be a factor. Lastly, price control across key components of the CPI, particularly some categories of food, will mitigate the supply side pressure which have caused price to rise. How does the development of inflation rate in Malaysia? The first one is the inflation rate for consumer prices in Malaysia moved over the past 61 years between negative 1.1% and 17.3%. As for 2021, an inflation rate of 2.5% was calculated. The second is, during the observation period from 1960 to 2021, the average inflation rate was 3.0% per year. Overall, the price increase was 477.83%. An item that cost Rm 100 in 1960 was charged Rm 577.83 in the beginning of 2022. What causes inflation in Malaysia? One of the causes of inflation in Malaysia is supply side constraint due to the impact of the lockdown on production and transportation of food and higher costs including feed for livestock. Besides, negative budget balance in relation to GDP, which was at its recent worst in 2010 at negative 4.66%, is also the major cause of the inflation in Malaysia. The statistics show the average inflation rate in Malaysia from 1987 to 2021, with projection up to 2027. In 2021, the average inflation rate in Malaysia amount to about 2.48% compared to the previous year.
The central bank has been described as the lender of last resort, which means that it is responsible for providing its economy with funds when commercial banks cannot cover a supply shortage. What is central bank? Every country has a central bank. In Malaysia, it is Bank Negara Malaysia. The primary function of a central bank is to manage the nation's money supply through activities duties such as managing interest rates, setting the reserve requirement, and acting as a lender of last resort to the banking sector during times of bank insolvency or financial crisis. Voiceover kedua. The central bank has been described as the lender of last resort, which means that it is responsible for providing its economy with funds when commercial banks cannot cover a supply shortage. In other words, the central bank prevents the country banking system from failing. However, the primary goal of central banks is to provide their country currency with price stability by controlling inflation. About Bank Negara Malaysia. Bank Negara Malaysia, the Central Bank of Malaysia, is a statutory body which started operations on 26 January 1959
Bank Negara Malaysia is governed by the Central Bank of Malaysia Act 2009. The Financial Service Act 2013 and the Bank Negara Malaysia Act 2009 have a major impact on the Bank Negara Malaysia to control not only financial institutions but also involved in the provision of finance and credit. What do you need to know about Bank Negara Malaysia? Bank Negara Malaysia is not an ordinary bank. Bank Negara Malaysia controlling monetary stability, thus it try to control inflation so that the price do not inflate and the value of the currency is always stable. Next, Bank Negara Malaysia can withdraw money without an ATM machine. It will ensure adequate supply and is in good condition. In addition, the money issued has advanced security features.
An interest rate is the amount of interest due per period as a proportion of the amount that deposit and borrowed, called the principal sum. The total interest on amount lent or borrowed depends on the principal sum, the interest rate, the compounding frequency, and the length of time over which it is lent, deposit, and borrowed. In Malaysia, the interest rate decisions are taken by the Central Bank of Malaysia, Bank Negara Malaysia. The official interest rate is the overnight policy rate. At the current interest rate level, the real rate of return on deposit after taking into account the expected rate of inflation is being maintained at level prevailing before the crisis. This has allowed saving in Malaysia to continue to be efficiently mobilized through the banking system. One of the best saving account in Malaysia, Citibank Accelerate Saving Account, has one of the highest interest rate with up to 4.88% per annum. It also enables your saving to grow faster with base and bonus interest calculated daily and credited to your account monthly.